Welcome, brownies, bobbins. Hello, friends. Welcome, brownies, bobbins, and acorns to Ignore the Bird, Follow the River. Our episode about Willow, solely about Willow, our obsession with Willow. And I'm here joined by my lovely co-host, Adam.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about episode 4 of Willow Watch.
Yeah, Willow Watch.
This episode is called Whispers of Nockmaar, episode 4. Jinx. I love it. Yeah.
I can't talk.
Whispers of Nockmaar.
You jinxed me.
Oh, right. That would be bad for the podcast. I release you of your curse. Speaking of releasing of curses, it seems like our talk last week about how a releasing of a certain curse from Graydon might be the predominant kind of story point in this episode. We were absolutely on it. I think it was pretty obvious. Not like, but we deserve a pat on the back, damn it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love how this one opens up with the because I mean, you know, it keeps opening with like the storybook pages, the parchment, and the watercolors and things like that. But it opens with the Malatrium. Hell yes. Yeah.
Alan! They're referencing you, bro!
Yep. Our buddy Al.
Oh man, yeah. My heart skipped a beat when that first first image of it popped up with that goblet that we know from like Bavmorda's Dais, and yeah, I mean, us knowing the lore, we knew like, as soon as we saw it, that's the Malatrium, and the runic letters inside, the narcotic, I think more than likely is. And Bavmorda's funny swastika-like emblem that graces the inner pages of it. A symbol we're going to see a lot throughout this series, it seems.
And through this episode, too.
Yes, an important part of this episode specifically.
Yeah, so we open through that, and we open into Nockmaar Castle as they're heading in. And Samantha was like, oh my God, is Willow just sort of lounging half-assedly in Bavmorda's throne? And I think he kind of is. He's just like sort of, well, here we are, with his leg up over the arm of everything.
Yeah, I thought that was a weird look. I don't know. What was your thoughts?
I think maybe Willow's just like, he didn't want to go there. And so now that he has to go there, he's just kind of like, all right, well, I'm going to disrespect Bavmorda's memory as much as I can. And I'm just going to be loungy. And he's kind of grumpy as hell this episode too.
Yeah.
He's a stodgy old fucker.
I think, the fatigue is starting to set in for Willow.
That's true.
And especially there was a lot of things that were kind of personally triggering for Willow in this. Maybe that's the wrong way to put it, but definitely some things that upset Willow in a way that's fairly deeper than surface level.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I wrote down, they chained Graydon in Grandma's house.
Yeah, chain Graydon in Grandma's house. I did think that was weird. I guess I could be wrong. I just never imagined Kit or Eric or even Sorsha like thinking of Bavmorda as family anymore after she died. Like that doesn't seem like, especially with Sorsha's relationship with her never having been a positive one. Yeah. I thought it was kind of like a weird and pretty heavy insult for Boorman to throw at Kit at first, but then it kept getting referenced over and over again that this was Kit's grandma, which, I mean, I just have, maybe that's my personal experience. I definitely, I don't necessarily like have a strong, like, I have stronger connections with a lot of non-blood family than I do with my blood family. So I just know how chosen families can be really powerful things, and especially for like um, liberating a perspective or freeing yourself from the past tyrannies of, I mean, in this case, literal tyrannies of your ancestors, your predecessors. And yeah, I felt weird for everyone, for Borman when he first says, as Kit calls her grandma. I was like, damn, that's rough, dude. I get we're all traveling, like, and we're upset. It's raining. That's rough, man. But no, yeah. Then Kit says it again later. So I think that's it's interesting that you wrote it that way as well.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, I think Borman's just that guy that's always going to poke the bear with the stick, no matter what. That's just his nature, and he's going to use that as as maybe his sense of humor that is maybe trying to disguise his fear of something. But also I feel like Kit is, you know, I mean, she references it and she's like, well, I guess this is my grandma, and sort of like sarcastically like, oh great, this is grandma's house. Yeah. Are you trying to plunder my grandma's house?
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's just in there for like, I think the writers just wanted to add some silliness, whether it be well thought out or not. I think that's a part of it as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that whole a lot of the beats for this definitely were kind of like the moment where Kit starts hearing the monologue from Sorsha that we heard a couple of episodes ago in episode 1. Yeah. Where you know, she's telling Kit about how Eric and her and all of her family have the blood of Bad Morta running through them, and you know, that whole plot setup kind of being kind of followed through here. But I felt like actually throwing that audio back in felt a little bit insulting, like to our intelligence as an audience. Like, what, do we not remember that happening? You know, maybe I'm too harsh a critic here, and I can totally accept that. But it is one of those things that that we could be spending. It is time that we could be spending having more meaningful relationships established and things like that that help make these payoffs hit harder. So yeah, there was a handful of things where that kind of comes up again in this episode, where it just feels like not necessarily all of the flashback stuff, but the story beats in this definitely felt a little bit rough in some cases.
Yeah, they do cut back and forth between scenes. I think they're maybe trying to keep it more interesting for people that don't have a huge attention span, possibly, or trying to tell, you know, how they do the story, what's going on in like what's going on parallel lines at the same time. But I think also, like, remember, it's the title is The Whispers of Nockmaar. So I think maybe they're just trying to tell the fact that, you know, this is like they're in this castle and this is what they're hearing. And maybe it's not necessarily for our edification. It's for like the fact that the characters are actually rehearing that again, the castle whispering it to them, and it's fucking with their head a little bit, I think. Maybe.
No, absolutely.
I read it.
The non-linear elements or the story beats kind of jumping back and forth to each other definitely isn't something that I was thinking was a detriment to the episode. There's just moments, there's a handful of moments where I thought they could have landed a little harder on the material. But I think one of the things I am noticing for this episode is they're really lucky to have Amar Chadha Patel in Borman, because it would be really hard to, or it would be really easy to dislike that character if he wasn't played as by such a charismatic individual.
Oh yeah.
And somebody who kind of knew that he had to bring that that element to it. That you, I noticed that there's a handful of that Borman tends to be used as kind of like a mouthpiece for right-wing humor in the show. Like, I mean, like deep tropes of right-wing humor. We got into it in a previous episode about, the "your generation" line. A boomer dog whistle. I think I called it, which I love the flavor of that. But not too far into it, when they're tying or they're chaining up Graydon, Borman says something along the lines of. Bad Morty used to have really wild parties. They go 3-4 days at a time, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's pretty innocuous, and I could, again, be kind of reading too deep into things, but it's an old trope to see in especially right-wing humor, and even beyond humor, just very conservative belief systems, that kink is often equated to evil for the sake of humor and things like that. And with that association being made by Mormon there, it's just one more example of these kind of very conservative belief systems kind of trickling through the story. Another one was later on when Jade hugs Borman, and everyone gets one hug per episode, kind of a limiting on the amount of care we're allowed to give to one another.
One good long kind of cry per quest.
Per quest, yeah.
One good long cry per quest, yeah.
Right. I get that these are jokes, that Borman is not necessarily a very serious person, but he is an intelligent person. I also, it's a friend, I was talking to our good friend, Resident Elwin, or the High Aldwin of TikTok, my buddy Tom, and they were saying that, we could, because I was kind of like venting my frustrations about these beats with Borman, because I do really love this character, and they reminded me that it's not too dissimilar from how Mad Mardigan is portrayed, early on, especially.
Oh yeah,
and I think that's a very fair comparison, but I also think that there's a pretty big difference between the two, in that essentially we're not dealing with an ensemble in the original Willow. Sure, Frangine, Rule, Finn Rizal, Laura, Willow, Mad Mardigan, Sorsha. This is a big ensemble if you look at it that way, but we know who our main characters are, and it's predominantly Willow and Mad Mardigan. And we get to see very clearly the path that Mad Mardigan eventually, that he journeys with Willow to get to the point where he says, "I serve the Nelwyn, Eric." And I think that as I've said over and over again during the during this podcast, I think that it gives that character the ability to grow. And I see that they are trying to essentially put these beats in for these characters to have those moments to grow, to change. But we don't have necessarily a main character established in the same way that we did in the originals. It feels very much more like an ensemble.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think those, like, I see your point on those jokes, but I also think that there's a healthy element of being very tongue in cheek. Like they're making the joke, but they're also making fun of it and of themselves at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's really taking them, like, those jokes, they're trying to take themselves too seriously.
No, I think it speaks to I agree. I definitely, in as far as I perceive this character, I don't think that Borman is some kind of, I mean, as I've said, I think the character is probably one of the most exciting in the show. And brilliantly portrayed. So, I mean, I just think, and I do believe in their that character's ability, that they will have some kind of growth along this story. But with ensembles, that tends to be deprioritized essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I think what it says to me is it's an attitude in the kind of conception level, whether it be writing or kind of that early story beats kind of theorizing, that they're not going to take a side. They want to try and gain as much of a wide audience as they possibly can. And fair enough. Willow wasn't necessarily the biggest blockbuster of all time or anything by no stretch.
Right.
But by that same token, Willow was uncompromising in that it had a very specific point of view that it was telling you about the entire time, very consistently.
Yeah. And over time, like, it definitely, I mean, definitely not a box office hit, like you said, but over time, it's become one of the most well-loved films, universally loved by so many different people from different walks of life and stuff too, which is great. I love it.
It's a beautiful thing. In that it's found so much of an audience all over. And in fact, a lot of because I'm combing all of social media for people's responses, trying to think of more beats to include in this show and things like that. And I'm finding a lot more of an international audience in the fandom.
Oh, cool.
There's no shortage of people from all over South and Central America. No shortage of people from all over the world, kind of tweeting or making TikToks, etc. about Willow, and just kind of reiterating how far its influence has spread, and something we've been talking about since day one of the podcast. And that I think our first episode, I was throwing shots at Pete Jackson and Lord of the Rings for not giving Willow the credit it deserves for being a visual inspiration.
Yeah, I just looked it up on Rotten Tomatoes, and the tomato meter is 53%, but the audience score is 79%. So in favor,
of the original.
Of the original, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's funny you bring up Rotten Tomatoes, because also in combing the internet for people's reactions to this, I find that it's also being review bombed on Rotten Tomatoes, the new series, by a bunch of bad faith right wingers who can't actually get past a surface level criticism of anything because they don't love or appreciate art or really understand anything, because they're stupid is the thing. Yeah,
I agree.
So just a lot of people, like, I actually I had my first encounter with one of these kind of accounts on my TikTok yesterday, and a very curious conversation happened unprompted, where someone got into my comments and was talking to me about how, like, they wanted to watch Willow, not an episode of the L Word. And I think you can tell what I wanted to say, but we did end up having a short conversation. I made another reaction to one of their comments, and, like, this person just seemed to be spouting a popular talking point that has been established about this show, or about a lot of media that's been coming about more recently that has more representation for queer people, for people of color, for Black people, for all kinds of people from marginalized groups. But I want Jade and Kit to be loud, proud, openly queer, punch you in the mouth if you say bigoted slurs queer, with a capital fucking Q. I hope we get some explanation in this show for why their homosexual relationship shouldn't be open and celebrated in this show. Why it needs to be something secretive.
Yeah.
Another weird note I took early on in the episode that we already talked about a little bit in our disco is Vermithrax in a Vestal Fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
and you had done some research on that, right?
I immediately heard it and was like, I've never heard any of those things, and I'm a fucking lore nerd. What is a Vermithrax? And I know I've heard Vestal. What is that? What is that word? And what's interesting is Vermithrax is a dragon from Dragon Slayer, a Disney fantasy film, from not too far separated in years from Willow, in fact.
Yeah.
Oh, pardon me. But so Vermithrax was actually even referenced in Game of Thrones relatively recently, which is really interesting.
I thought I had
one
heard
of the Targaryen dragons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, okay, I figured out what Vermithrax was. It makes sense. You know, you can kind of almost like hear dragon in the word especially once you know, like worm, you know, however you want to say it, is a common way to talk about flightless dragons.
Oh yeah.
But Vestal Fair was the one that like kept sticking. I had to go look it up, and Vestal Fair is an allusion to Festivus, if I'm not mistaken. And that is the Roman a Roman high holiday celebrating the god Vesta or Hestia in Greek, the Greek equivalent.
Yeah.
The thing about this fair was it was a multi-day Roman holiday that was most of the participants of it would have been women, and the priestesses of Vesta's temple were all virgins. And in fact, it was such their virginity was such an important fact to the Romans that their punishment for having sex was being buried alive.
Right. So
this is a fucking word salad, and that's why it kind of pisses me off, because it doesn't make any sense. Like, it is reference with a couple of words stuck in between to make it a sentence, and why? I just don't understand the like necessity for that entire moment, you know?
I think there's a couple reasons for it, like, or at least just the way that I read it, because I feel like they're trying to do, you know, it's a Lucasfilm property, and like, you know, things in Star Wars, they're always saying things that you have no point of reference for, which is like things like, oh, that's like, remember when we were in that nest of Gundarks? Like, what the hell is a Gundark? Unless you're like a super Star Wars nerd like myself, you're not going to know what a Gundark is. And even when it was said in the film, you didn't know what a Gundark was then. You had to wait until books came out later on. And that's what Star Wars does, is they reference in-world things like that you can't find anywhere else. Having said that, Willow, the movie, has been known to reference things that are actually, you know, like have the same name as things in our actual world, you know, like Kashmir and things like that. So I think that's part of it. Like, they're trying to create that world building with, you know, little bits and pieces of things from lore or actual places in our actual world. And then because like just like not too long after they reference that and stuff, Willow gives the backstory of Bavmorda and the Order of the Worm. And so like maybe that's just like a little like very quick foreshadowing of that, you know, sort of a thing.
No, I can agree. I think there are justifications we can make for it, but narratively it's unnecessary and confusing because it literally doesn't mean anything. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, narratively unnecessary is a frustrating element of a lot of this show. And I don't think a dry, flavorless piece of media is something that I would ever want out of Willow.
Maybe, I mean, who knows? Maybe it'll pay off later on in the series.
Yeah, I think your point, to your point, I think like going in, looking into Vermithrax at a Vestal Fair, you learn that Vermithrax is a worm, very famous one, a Disney dragon, and the connection to the cult of the worm, I think is, it's something, but yeah, it's a frustrating line for me. And another kind of odd reference was the Fibonacci hex thing, and we hear that a couple of we hear it once, but then we hear Laura say it wrong later. But yeah, I just like.
They think.
So is Italy? Are they going to have Italy here now too? I mean,
like at the end of the episode, it looks like maybe like the immemorial city could be like a ruins of Italy, like type of place. Like it looks like a mix of like maybe Rome, Greece, and Pompeii. There's ashes everywhere. There's everything's knocked over. There's nobody in sight except for Eric. So who knows? I'm reserving judgment until the end of the series, and then I'll say, okay, that's, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just gonna wait.
No, yeah, I mean, if they somehow pay off a tie to our world, I'll laugh my ass off and probably enjoy the absurdity of it.
Yeah.
I love, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'll say it a jillion times, I love Masters of the Universe, and I think part of the reason why I love that movie so much is because it ends up converging with our world, and I think there's something really fun about that. I think that that trope is something I've always enjoyed, so... Yeah, if it pays off, it pays off. But Fibonacci was a famous Italian mathematician.
Right.
I don't know why he's creating hexes for Anduin.
Willow banished Bavmorda with math. I mean,
you banished me with math. That's for damn sure. That's how you're ever to me. You present me with mathematical issues.
What is magic if not science that's not understood yet, and what is science if not or without math? Sure.
I think that's a great way of looking at it. I did want to say I thought Graydon and his portrayal, or how they portrayed him in The Demon, was really interesting, very creative, and in a lot of cases I am still unsure. And I think in a good way. At first I was frustrated. At first I was kind of angry and thought they were doing this sloppy shit. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, maybe they were really hitting something here with Graydon being possessed. Because, like, in the beginning, in episode 1, nobody fucking knows who Willow is. Graydon conveniently suddenly knowing this alternate history of Willow and Finrazel defeating Bavmorda felt like we didn't have anything building up to Graydon ever knowing anything about that. When Sorsha gives her speech, she's talking about her and Mad Mardigan defeating Bavmorda, Finrazel, but Willow isn't brought up specifically because of their feud or whatever.
Right, yeah.
So his involvement in the defeat of Nockmaar is basically erased from history in this world. So Graydon knowing it, how? And that was like, at first when I'm watching this episode.
If not in that world, at least in that kingdom.
It made sense to me once I watched the episode a few times and like really kind of thought about what that was trying to do. And Graydon doesn't fucking know. The demon knows. The Lich knows.
Right.
Like, the information, even if it is coming from Graydon directly, is influenced by the new knowledge that he's gained by the curse. And I don't think that's going to go away, is the really interesting thing. Of course, he's not going to be able to receive new messages, but I don't believe any of the things that would have been knowledge that Graydon wouldn't have had, that he had access to because of the Lich, I don't think he's going to forget that. And I also think it's plenty possible that that even having Graydon's backstory, having this curse that he's lived with for since childhood. I think that even has more potential to play into how he knows Narcotic and where he might have studied, magic previously. All of these things that we've been wondering so far, So yeah, I the more I watch it, the more I really like this episode for it's the way that it portrays Graydon. And shout out to Tony Revolori for absolutely crushing it.
Oh yeah. And Graydon even says, I've had experience with this before and I'm not strong enough to stop it. He does, if not that knowledge that you were talking about, he does have prior knowledge of different things like that. Like you were saying, we'll find out hopefully where he's studied what has happened. And I wonder, like later on in one of the flashbacks or images that the Lich puts into his head or whatever, he says, what was it? Oh, his father says, you've stolen something from me, and whether it be that evil curse or whatever it is, or whether it be his brother, who is supposed to be king, there's something, so definitely something there.
Yeah, remind me, Graydon's mom. She's not alive?
I don't believe so. At least she's not in the picture at all that we know of.
Yeah, and we haven't got a ton of information on that. I feel like it was Graydon might have brought it up for a moment at some point, but it wasn't covered very extensively.
Yeah.
I haven't got a chance to go rewatch every episode and find that note.
Right.
To confirm, but yeah, it does that scene with King Hastur. What's his name?
Yeah, Hastur. I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, with the King of Galadorn. I think
his father.
Yeah. I think he's his lines kind of allude to that that same. Yeah, I'm just reiterating what you're saying, basically. Just definitely was the brother, but what happened to the mom?
Right, yeah.
Oh! Depending on what lore we're going through, what lore they end up using, it's totally possible that Kit and fucking Graydon are fucking cousins.
That's true.
Waylon Drew's book says that fucking Madmartigan is a noble from Galadorn.
From Galadorn, yeah.
Ew. Fucking typical royals, fucking inbreeding all the time to maintain power in the hands of the fewest people possible outside their family. What fucking weirdos, dude.
And then their IQs go down the toilet.
Yeah! What the fuck? I didn't even think about that till this episode, and it just hit me like a ton of fucking bricks. And I was so upset about it, I had to bring it up in this episode and make sure that, hopefully they just keep going from Alan's book, because his lore was much like mine. And in fact, Sorsha alludes to it in episode 1, where an impossible thief, rogue, I can't remember exactly how she puts it, but it doesn't seem like she is implying that he comes from any kind of family of repute. The way that she talks about Madmartigan early on in her monologue.
Oh yeah.
But yes, so yes, I hope they're using Alan Varney's work from the Willow TTRPG book, because that would mean they're not cousins and upset me less. But also, considering what we know about the King of Galadorn and Sorsha, it wouldn't surprise me if they were like, well, fuck it, they're cousins, they can get married. What's wrong with that?
So go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I had a weird note that is literally just 300-year-old demon, ?
300-year-old demon.
It's what Borman says you're being, while your fiance Greyonce is being ravaged by a 300-year-old demon.
Oh. Is he guessing or does he know? Has he heard it? He seems to be fairly worldly.
And it also it's not terribly, I mean, Bab Morda was only 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, not long ago.
I mean, this this demon would have been around possessing motherfuckers in the original Willow movie. Wild. Okay. Got to work that out. But also, yeah, I mean, would they be possessing maybe one of those bearded dudes that Bavmorda was always hanging around with?
Right? Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. Is that demon like just the Lich's pet, or is it part of the Lich, or like
Right, because it's interchangeable. They say the Lich, sometimes they say a demon, depending on like who's talking and when about the possession of Graydon.
Well, and
it's
then
really interesting.
The backstory of Bavmorda from Willow, talking about Bavmorda when she was young, she had promise and she was abducted by the Order of the Worm. And then Bavmorda, and then they talk about later on they give a little bit more on that lore, but then Willow, I kind of like this scene. It was pretty fun. It was comical when Willow says Bavmorda turned all the soldiers into pigs, and Willow and Finrazel turned them all back, and Borman's like, "You turned them all back?" And Willow is like, "I think so." And then they both like Borman spits his food out, and Willow looks at his bowl and then sets it aside, indicating that they're eating roast pork or something like that. And they're like, "Oh,
well, yeah." You can see the pig on a spit in the fire that they've built in the throne room.
Okay. Okay.
It's unclear that it's a pig, but I had to go back and watch that scene a couple of times once I realized that's what they were saying, because like I was like, wait, this is not, that can't be right. But so what I do know is it looks like a young pig, one that couldn't have been around 20 years ago. So
right.
Even if it was a human Galadoran soldier or whatnot that Bavmorda or Willow and Finrazel forgot to change back, it was a descendant, maybe, if that really was the case. But yeah, I don't think so. I want to believe that they did it right.
Pigs.
Although we do know that we have covered the fact that they had to do it one by one by one.
Right. Pigs can live anywhere between 15 to 20 years. So it's definitely a descendant of of a part pig, part human. if it is. Or it could just
is curious just generally that they would have found a pig at Nockmaar to just eat.
Right.
So
Nockmaar pigs are the best eaten. They're just so tender.
Oh no.
I'm just kidding.
So, other than dramatic tension, is there a reason that you can imagine they're suggesting killing Graydon before, like, trying to heal him?
I mean, from what what they say in the scene, I mean, it's impatient. Like, at least for Kit, she's like, well, this is taking too long. I want to go save my brother. So I don't want to have to deal with this guy being an evil thing that could, turn on us at any moment. So let's just kill him and go save Eric. I think impatience is the big thing.
Yeah, it just like, it was weird because that seemed to be what was going to happen. I mean, the trying to exorcise the demon from Graydon seemed to be like what we were going there for. But
yeah,
then they go into the throne room. Willow sits on the throne, and they kind of just hang out for the first 10 minutes of the episode, and then Kit's just like, why aren't we killing things? Yeah, absolutely, it's an impatience thing, but
and indifference.
What Willow's right there, as is Alora, and why aren't they like, we should heal Graydon? Like, why aren't we doing that? This is it felt weird that like the idea of killing Graydon was put forth in the narrative, like explicitly, before healing him was. And like, it just, it felt like a way to get dramatic tension that wasn't necessarily like necessary or earned.
Yeah.
But and you can see them continue to use it as a dramatic hinge to kind of fall back on later on in the episode as well, where Elora's there looking at baby Elora, Willow's on the ground, Graydon's like going nutballs, and Kit is the one to stop the process of killing Graydon. Instead, kind of like making that decision to go talk to Elora, believe in Elora. So I think it pays off there. I think that it makes sense to have that tension there. Like obviously they wanted it for that end of the episode, but like I think a stronger choice, if they weren't pushed so much for time, would have been probably to go back to like have the healing be the priority, and the scenes where it's taking too long, where Elora and Willow are being kind of like intimidated by the demon, using the voices of their loved ones to try and stop them from exercising it. I think those moments could have been much better, like a much better starting point for trying to kill Graydon.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it felt like an out of order kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know. It seemed rushing to the idea to kill Graydon. I didn't necessarily love their choice there. But I do think it works out in the end, I like the idea that Kit is finally growing and learning and trusting Elora, and even goes as far as to tell her about the Echoberry bush, all that stuff.
Yeah, but she takes her fucking time.
Yeah, she sure do.
I think 3 times in this episode, I wrote down, like right now, like shortly after, because they finally decide, well, how are we going to heal this guy? And then Graydon talks a little bit about this and that, and then Willow's like, we got to do a purgation, so probably find that in the Malatrium, and then that's when they get the book and start doing that. But then, like I put, like shortly thereafter, I'm like, oh yeah, because Willow needs help. Elora thinks she can't do it, and I put, damn it, Kit, tell her you saw the tree. She can do fucking magic, and that was the first time. Maybe it was the second time, but like there's like at least 3 or 4 times where, I mean, she has a chance, like she has a good chance to tell her, and instead of just going through with it, she lets other things distract them and just doesn't. And Samantha, when Samantha and I were watching, she was like, well, yeah, they're together for a long ass time. She had way more than 3 or 4 chances to tell. She could have told her any point during this, and it's just her just like self-absorption that is causing her to not tell her, whether it be jealousy. I don't know what it is. It's just I mean, maybe it's lack of life experience. I don't know. But yeah, that's frustrating to me, and I understand like this character could like I understand this character would probably be that way, but they really lean so hard into it. I think I don't know, and I'm not saying that they just lean so hard into the fact that she's like, I don't like her because she's getting attention and I'm the princess, and I'm so I'm not going to tell her this key thing that she needs to help all of us, like, yeah.
No, yeah, absolutely. Spoiled little princess, estimates her abilities above their actual expertise, arrogant, ungrateful, I mean, a little bit bigoted towards the Nelwyn. Got to remember that moment where she was like, I don't care about their culture.
Yeah.
But yes, she is learning. She is growing, and, that's better than, most people in the royal family are just really weird garbage people. So Kit's doing better than all of them. What were you going to say? Sorry.
Oh, no, I was... I just thought it was funny that I was just looking at the notes. It's funny that they transferred from eating pigs that might have been human to the Malatrium bound in the skin of a satyr.
Yeah, satyrs, dude. I'm a big fan of. Okay, so here's another thing: is like my big complaint isn't that Vestal, the whole reference to Vesta and Vestals, isn't that it's a okay. I like the idea of a satyr being there because it's a fantasy creature well established and not just Greek and Roman mythology, but in several other types of mythologies, maybe by different names. A goat man who is horny and likes wine. That's a satyr.
Yeah.
Which same. So
which is it's not too far off from a fawn as well, right?
Correct. Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Tumnus.
Yes, absolutely. And I like the imagery there, bound in the skin of a satyr, meaning that, at some point in the deep past, there were satyrs in Anduin. We haven't seen any. Maybe we will. I hope we do, because I love a horny goat. And yeah, but what I also noticed was the purgation. Did you look up Namshab?
I have not. I just looked at. I heard the word purgation, and I, just figured the root word was purge.
Well, purgation, yeah, absolutely. Purgation of Namshab, though, is a reference. Another reference. Namshab is a reference to Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. If you're not familiar, it's like the book that essentially predicted the idea of a metaverse, and in fact gives name to a metaverse that Zuckerberg is using for his weird dystopian thing. Because Snow Crash is in fact one of the first cyberpunk dystopias ever told. One of the predominant kind of launching points for the genre. Hero.
Okay.
Yeah. And Namshab is a reference to a programming language, essentially for the human subconscious within Snow Crash, and that is a reference I thought was really fucking smart, because in a purgation ritual, this idea of programming and human subconsciousness, makes a lot of, maybe not direct sense, but you can see how we put the two together, and it creates a synergy.
That's pretty cool.
It's obscure too, and everyone should read Snow Crash, which is another reason I thought it was a solid reference. There's a couple other really wonderful references in this, not that I also really appreciated. I think that a lot of the narcotic rituals that Willow and Alora were chanting were references to Lovecraft or Bob Howard, their pulp fantasy novels and things like that. And in fact, Bob Howard, it was not the Cult of the Worm, it's the
Order.
Huh?
The Order.
Oh, but yes, in Bob Howard, in one of his Brock McMorn, the Pict hero that he wrote about in fantasy and sci-fi serialized magazines, didn't write it down. I'm so mad at myself right now. But yeah, it was essentially the a similar kind of story setup, where not necessarily in a castle, but in this sect of people who believed in this taboo magic, these taboo belief systems, this kind of evil cult-like appearance, kind of make I guess what I'm trying to say is is that the reference there to Bob Howard is another one we've seen, like we were talking about a few episodes ago. I think episode 2, where there was another slight allusion to the Conan books and Bob Howard's work. And you can tell that somebody involved in this really, really loves that kind of pulpy fantasy stuff, and I'm here for it. Do you think that they were doing a COVID joke? with the vermiscus goo line, don't eat it, don't.
Oh.
And like Kit's response, like, you mean, is it like, how contagious is it? Like, if I get it on my hand and then I touch my face, I was like, are you guys doing a COVID joke right now? Are you really fucking doing this?
I think maybe. I mean, it seems
they would have been
like
shooting
that.
during it, so it makes sense how it seeps in, you know?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, absolutely.
I thought that was weird, but also kind of appreciated.
I like the finding ingredients montage that they did.
Yeah. I thought there was a lot of really cool stuff, kind of like involved with the background to all of that. Especially in how it allows Kit's character to grow with the story. This arrogance kind of fading into this shell of kind of like fear and understanding of mortality. Yeah, and I think Ruby Cruz does actually a really great job of kind of like playing that out in very subtle ways, like on in expression and body language and things like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, and then they say the crone knows we're here, so the crone knows. And then Borman sums it up. All right, watch out for the Gales. Don't touch evil goo. Stay out of the tower. And then they all go off and do their separate things. And then Kit and Jade have a moment together.
The relationship between Kit and Jade, as we were talking about in the last episode, it has to grow with them. You know, just like in real life, it has to make sense for us, the audience. We have to watch both of their personal growths, kind of meet in the middle at like where they're at as in a relationship. So yeah, I think they're doing a pretty bang up job so far of kind of keeping pace, all of these different kind of types of growth within these these other characters in this relationship. I think they're doing a solid job with it. Yeah. I guess this isn't really like a note or anything like that. I just really enjoyed when Borman picks up that wine and you get like a solid 5 seconds of him kind of swishing it around in his mouth and like,
yeah,
you know, that whole build up to it. I thought that was a smart, like they did that in a couple of different setups and that was it. Like,
yeah.
And like you really get to sit with his performance for that. And
like trying to pry it from the skeleton's hand and pulling the cork and spitting it out. And I was immediately like, why do people always spit the cork out? And Samantha was just like, well, just wait. I don't think he's going to need that cork anymore. He's going to drink the whole thing. And he does.
Yeah. Does he throw it at some point? I can't remember.
He tosses the bottle over his shoulder as he's walking. Yeah, that whole performance, like, I mean, he has wide range, dramatic range, but he also like he can be a very physical actor, like just without any words. I love that performance.
It was just a really wonderful little beat. I thought, man, just a great little moment for that character that I think they obviously kind of expected us to fall in love with as an audience. So Kit is asking about they bring most of the ingredients for the ritual, but they need the brined possum bladder, right?
Yeah.
Kit says something along the lines of, "You think that's just something that people have in their cupboards?" Bad Morta fucking would. Yes. Why are you like this?
Yeah, it's essence of nightshade and Willow. Man, Willow's so testy during this whole episode. Like, you know, he's like, well, I've got everything but the essence of nightshade, and Willow's just like, you can't skip. Like he slams something down. He's like, you can't skip ingredients. Blah blah blah. The whole castle could blow up and stuff like that. Which rewind to like a previous episode where Willow carelessly packs a fucking like barrel full of highly explosive wax into their wagon and lightning strikes it. You know, it's actually kind of funny.
I don't know if it's fatigue or like we were talking about in the last episode where Willow is constantly keeping everyone at arm's length.
Yeah.
Trying not to develop a relationship with them because he's like scared of that. It's one of his big fears at this point, is like having new people to care about because he's seen so many people pass. And I think, you know, that might be elements of it, but I also feel like it's like whether, I don't know if it was direction or how it was written or Warwick necessarily, but it definitely feels like those moments with like a little bit of tweaking could have landed a lot more transparent, where as far as like that's concerned. But I think Willow being a little bit curmudgeon-y in his older age is also kind of understandable. But true. It's also a product of his like ability to build relationships with new people. Yeah, I just think those moments could have landed better as well, you know? I wish... I want that line with more of the delivery of, you never ever give a baby blackroot, you know?
Right, yeah.
There's a certain amount of, like, paternalness there. Where in here, it's like a frustration, an anger, and impatience that kind of is played out through those moments. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I do like how that scene sort of plays out with, you know, Kit can't find the ingredient. Willow's like, well, you can't skip ingredients. And then Elora's kitchen knowledge is like, well, if you can't find that, well, then just use this, because you're going to find that residue in the brined possum bladder, because they eat that all the time. And so, and it makes sense, you know, and it just keeps building Elora's knowledge, like whether, you know, like her real life experience is going to merge with her just natural magical ability, I think. And I mean, it kind of does do that a little bit here in this episode too, later on, but it just, it builds that, and it shows precedence for that, which I think that's good story building, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Speaking on that, it's like it doesn't feel like anyone has any faith at any point in Willow's the Melatron's purgation ritual.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we were talking earlier. It seems like this idea of killing Graydon is leaned on really hard in this episode, and the idea of this ritual going well just doesn't seem very likely. Kit and Jade and Borman are pretty consistently talking about, even while gathering ingredients for the ritual, talking about how they're going to have to kill Graydon. That's just how it's going to end, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Kit is just that impatient indifference to Graydon, and to, like, you know, just a little bit of self-absorption. But then I think Jade and Borman's are like, well, we've seen stuff like this before, you know, and there was no way to stop it then. You know, they're just like, I think those two are really just sort of, if this doesn't work, we got to start preparing ourselves now for what we've got to do, you know?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It just seems so strange after, like, the last episode was so focused on, like, so much of the dialogue was focused on, we can save Borman, or not Borman, Valentine, you know? You know, how we can still save him, right? And, like, with Graydon, it's just like, we can kill him, right?
Yeah,
I thought that was weird. And it's another moment where it's like this tension that they're pushing for, you know. I mean, obviously you're not going to kill Graydon. Like, I don't believe you when you say it. Like, that's, you know, the show itself isn't going to kill Graydon. The tension is already gone because we've seen the trailers, and there's a handful of things that haven't happened yet that Graydon needs to do.
And I think from Kit's point of view, and they say, you know, like, it's not easy to kill something that's not trying to kill you back. So I think from Kit's point of view, let's kill Graydon, and her, like, in her subconscious, it's really just like, oh, I got to clean my room, so let's sweep everything under the bed so that it's out of the way, and then maybe they won't notice and we can just move on with what's next. It's like she says she wants to kill him, but she doesn't understand the full impact of that.
Sure. I did want to say we kind of brushed up on it a second ago. But Jade's scene, where she's off and has her own visions, that is a really fascinating fucking scene. Like, we hear, like, her, like, first vision is of her dying mother. And knowing that Jade's family was killed off by bone reapers, right? We find that out in episode 1 or 2. Well, instead of it being bone reapers, in this case, it's Kale.
Kale, yeah.
Now, we've already drawn a parallel between Kale and the bone reapers because of the skulls and the aesthetic.
Yep.
What is that? And in fact, we see at the end of this episode, Kale's helmet and skull lying just below just above the soil. Yeah. Outside Nockmaar. So it really feels like we're going to tie Kale into the story and possibly directly to Jade, and I am fascinated in how that's going to happen.
Yeah. Excuse me. Sorry. I wrote a little note by that where I wrote Jade sees her mother. And I wrote, are Jade and Alora the same age? And if so, maybe like, was her family killed by the bone reavers because they were searching for a child that had the mark? And maybe they thought she, because they were rounding up all the kids and all the mothers, like the newborns and stuff like that. So maybe there's probably not anything to that, but I was just like, oh, maybe this could be like part of the story too,
Yeah. That's actually really interesting that you got there, because I was that was another thing I was talking to my buddy High Aldwin at TikTok. Go follow Tom, they're wonderful. Yeah, they had a thought that they've been a big proponent since way before the show premiered. I think before there might have even been trailers that Aaron Kellerman was going to be Alora.
Yeah.
And, I think what we were talking about, though, is that it's still a possibility that maybe not being Alora Dannon, being another Dannon, another person who falls into the Chimerian bloodline.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a fascinating thing, and not one I thought about. I just was very curious. My note was basically, is Kale showing up because this is Nockmaar, or is Kale showing up because Jade directly has some kind of connection with Kale? Was someone wearing Kale's armor potentially when her family was slaughtered?
Right.
I think that's, or a replica of it or something. I think that's a really interesting question, and I think the way that you're putting it is, yeah, it does seem like Alora and Jade are near, if not the exact same age, and it's very possible that not too long after the fall of Nockmaar, fall of Bab Morda, that is when Jade and her family were killed, potentially by the remnants of the Nockmaar army, potentially led by somebody, like you were saying, wearing Kale's armor, something like that. People still looking for the mark to try and serve their queen. I think that's another absolutely absolutely a possibility here. Of course, this does make me remember the moments where later on, like when we see in the trailers where Willow is laughing and scratching with the bone reapers, and when we spend a little bit more time with them. And my theory has been so far that the Bone Reavers are kind of the Vlad the Impaler of the story, kind of using intimidation and fear to keep their themselves and their comrades safe.
Yeah.
But I mean, we don't know anything about them. We've only heard of them a couple of times. We saw them once. They knew Borman. Maybe there is a tie there to Mad Mardigan, and like you were saying, potentially Christian Slater could be one of them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I can't wait to see what Christian Slater's character is going to be. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah. I hope that we get a lot more of this kind of deep backstory for what's happened to Mad Mardigan.
Oh yeah.
Like in the next, I mean, we have 4 episodes left. I'm starting to get to that point where I'm like, how are they going to wrap up all these fucking ends at this point?
My guess is I don't think they are. I think they're gonna wrap up a good number of them, but hopefully season 2, season 3, however many seasons we get. I want to go back to when they're doing the purgation thing ritual, because they're back to when when Willow pulls up those shears and Graydon's like, oh, and then he just cuts his shirt open and they see his scars. And then Graydon says, well, I was sick when I was a kid. I don't know what it was. I just know it was bad and I'm not supposed to talk about it. It was shameful. And so there's that. I like that. I'm just really fascinated about excuse me, about what the hell is Graydon's backstory. I mean, we get little glimpses and little snippets of the backstory, but like nothing concrete, just shit that makes you want they're really teasing you well because you want more. You want to know what the hell it is. What is this curse? Why does he have these scars? What the hell did he do? Like we see some things later in the episode, but man, that's one of the most interesting things for me in this episode,
Those scars look really interesting as well. It looks like chains wrapped around him in like an X around his torso. And actually, I think it was more like there was the X shape, and then there was also one running this way.
Yeah, it almost looks like an asterisk, almost like the symbol on the front of the Malatrium.
That's exactly what I'm getting to. But the center kind of like, because it definitely had like in the center a certain kind of design, but there wasn't a clear shot of it. So we don't really like I guess there was clear shots of it, but because of the way it's like mounds of what looks like, skin that were severely burned.
Yes. Yeah.
Like it looks like searing hot chains were put on it.
Absolutely.
It does resemble in a way a lot of the the image that we're getting, the emblem of Bavmorda, the cult.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they go further. We already talked a little bit about the chant that he says and stuff like that, but then what he sees, like about his father calling him a failure and you can redeem yourself from what you stole from me. And he says it wasn't me. And then you get his brother saying, it's okay, you can do it, and I'll catch you if you fall. And then we get a little bit more bigger glimpse into that later on in the episode, but that's just like you're like, holy shit, where's this going? What happened? Like what's the real spill the tea. I want to know what the tea is,
And two, kind of what we were talking about earlier with the whole incestuous royalty. Like he talks, he's talking in his father, or he's hearing his father, he's hearing his brother, and then suddenly he's talking in Mad Mardigan.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Literally, like, does the entire meeting of Willow or the Nelwyn contingent questing party that takes Allura to the crossroads, like literally his first lines, Mad Mardigan's first lines in the movie.
Get me some water.
Yeah, exactly.
P-word.
Exactly. It feels like they're trying to say something, but I'm not sure if my familial like nobility inbreeding thing is what they're trying to do. It's just how I'm reading into it because history.
Yeah, and
but it is really fascinating how they actually do insert Val Kilmer's actual lines of dialogue over Tony Revolori's.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I mean, we know, like, we as the audience and lore nerds, we know that that's the Lich talking through him and sifting through his memories, but like, and it's telling him what he wants it to, or what it wants him to know, or what it wants everybody else to know. But the best lies, the best deception is with elements of truth, and so you don't quite know what's the truth and what isn't, and which part you should take and which part you should leave.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. I think with all of this deception being done through Graydon, it's really unclear because Valentine didn't show any of these kinds of signs. He wasn't speaking through other people. He was just Valentine. So he had all of the knowledge of both the Lich and Valentine.
Yeah.
And nothing more, it would seem. So when Graydon is cursed, suddenly he is able, it's unclear whether he is speaking, people are speaking through him, if he is, with Mad Mardigan's lines, given access to people's memories, with using Eric's voice was really interesting as well, because Eric's voice definitely seemed like it was just telling the truth. It's dark and it's hot. Definitely seems like what we see later at the end of the episode when we do see Eric.
Mm-hmm. And then Mim's voice.
Right, which does feel like the real deception there.
Yeah.
Like that is fairly clear that Mims would never talk to her father, who literally 2 episodes ago she said, "You're my hero," and all of that really wonderful, heartwarming stuff to Willow before they parted ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, but she does. The Lich does through Mim's voice. Is starting to hint at the hidden kind of knowledge, the hidden secrets of what happened to the Nelwyn, what happened to Kaya, to Renan.
Mm-hmm.
A distraction that does effectively kind of split Willow and Allura.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to great effect. It's getting its job done. I don't want you to exercise me, so here, look at this. Look over there. Shit. Now and now they're pissed off at each other, and she leaves, and it's her decision.
Yeah. It was and it was also good. I mean, from kind of like wanting to see these characters grow and develop bonds. Willow and Allura kind of becoming separated at this point does give Kit and Allura time to bond and grow together. Kit obviously is. They both still got their walls up because of how everything started between them. They don't really have a good relationship so far.
Yeah, and it works out great for the Lich, because I'm sure the Lich, like, if there was any place for them to take shelter and try and save Graydon, this castle is where the Lich would want them to be, because he knows it's haunted. He knows that it's gonna whisper to them, and once you split the party, all bets are off. And so like that gets everybody out in the way. The whispers are happening, and everybody gets separated basically. And gives the Lich, the opening that it needs to sort of break Willow and free itself and everything like that. But cutting back to I think it's a pretty poignant line that Borman has. Like, it's in between like the purgation things, like where Borman and Kit are talking, And then at the end of of their scene, Borman says, "Well, Bavmorda would be very proud of her granddaughter right now." And I think that's the thing that makes Kit sort of stop and take stock of just what is she doing, why is she doing it, and what's important, and things like that. And that leads her to go exploring, and she finds that tapestry that we talked about that we saw in the trailer.
One that I thought was Eric discovering that tapestry the whole time. Yeah. But it does, I don't know if you caught this, but when it zooms in on the induction of Bavmorda in that tapestry, it's her face.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's her face. And I'm assuming, which is interesting because the other being pictured in that tapestry in that little panel is, I'm assuming it's the crone, but it looks like, they're dressed in white. They look fairly fair. They don't look cronish, so that's interesting. I guess, looking fair and feeling foul is maybe the phrase I'd use for that, probably. But and then they go to the panel of I don't know if it's the first panel or the next panel, but like you see the city, and we were speculating in past episodes of our podcast what that was. But the more I think about it, I think that is the immemorial city, but just not yet in ruins.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're dead on there, my friend. Yeah, that tapestry was, I hadn't given myself a chance to really like go through every single frame of it, but I plan to.
Oh yeah.
Because there's a lot in that tapestry, I can tell.
Oh yeah. I took I screenshotted it so that I could blow it up and look at it like long ago when it was in the trailer. I didn't do it for this episode because it actually kind of happens so quickly that she accidentally gets too close and it just goes up, and man, it's like it burns up pretty quickly. It must be a silk tapestry or something. I don't know what it is, but
well, I mean, first of all, I think it was part of the like the dreams, that or Whispers of Nockmaar that everyone's kind of like under the spell of at the moment.
Yeah.
And I didn't even read it as Kit getting too close to it and it burning. I just read it as it bursting into flames, essentially.
Oh, okay.
But it's totally possible that I missed that moment where it, like, Kit does get too close.
Yeah.
Because that would, at least, it would be one of those things that, like, a character like Kit would feel bad about, essentially.
Yeah.
Kind of highlighting Kit's irresponsibility, her impatience, things like that, and it kind of almost being a subtle call out.
Yeah.
In that way,
definitely. And then I like and it's overdubbed with the whispers, where we get to hear like Bavmorda pledging her life. Pledge your life. Do you pledge your life to our endeavor that we might deliver this world from suffering into his warm embrace? And will you embrace the light of the Eternal One? So if the crone is like the Eternal One's instrument, who is the Eternal One? And what's that all about?
Well, at the end of the episode, Willow tells him a little bit more about the blood of the Six. They were six Fae that at the beginning of the world split off from the mother or the mothers? Yeah, mothers, plural.
They killed their mothers, right?
They betrayed the mothers and serve a dark power, and that is where essentially the blood of the Six, the cult, or the not coven, not cult, but you said it before.
Order of the Worm?
Order of the Worm, yeah. Where that is essentially all started. Bavmorda eventually being inducted into the Order of the Worm, joining the Blood of the Six. And I think that's that's why the fair-haired character in the tapestry is portrayed as such, because they were fae. And so far, every fae we've seen is this almost sparkling kind of white, both hair and in complexion. These beings of light, effectively.
Right. Yeah. Is the crone then? I keep wanting to say Galadriel, but I know that's the wrong franchise. What's her name? Now I don't know. Sherlindria. I don't know why my mind blanked on that, but is she in fact like is the crone Sherlindria's like arch nemesis? Was there a rift in the Fae? Is that why that like? I feel like this has deep waves that it affects a lot.
I mean, they hit this whole back. Yeah, they hit the whole Blood of the Six thing so many different times and so many different ways in this episode. I think it's definitely going to come into play. I mean, even the Order of the Worm was something got brought up in episode 1 or 2. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Totally.
So yeah, definitely seems like that's something we're going to be talking about. And here, as far as like what I think this dark power, I think that is the worm. I think this, I think that's the him they're referring to.
That makes sense. And then we move to like after that tapestry scene, then we cut to Borman and Jade having their moment, and her. Like him sort of helping her come to terms with what's going on, and like they give an embrace, and you get the line that you had mentioned earlier about like you get one good cry per quest, and but I like how he's obsessed. He's obsessed with that golden door with the symbol of Nockmaar on it. He's just trying to find it, and he's like, what does he say? He says something about like. What if there's something in there like a giant golden statue of an eagle fighting a horse? And I'm like, what the? I don't know. He's just like his wackiness cracks me up. And then they get they hug and comfort each other. And then he talks about his partner dying and that. And I'm like, well, which partner is he talking about? Is it like his romantic partner? Is it his partner in crime? Is it his partner Mad Mardigan, who was his he was his squire, and Mad Mardigan was essentially his mentor. I'm guessing. So I want to know more about that. Hopefully they'll pay that off. I'm sure they will.
Yeah, very very curious about how that's all going to play out. I mean, what I noticed about the vault is when Borman first, maybe not his first approach of it, but there's a voice that speaks to him from it. Yeah. And at first I thought, this is a seductive voice, a voice that's calling him to her arms, thing like that. So this idea of it being a romantic partner that Borman brings up later being likely. But I was talking to my partner, Kat, and they were saying that a lot of what they were getting, and in fact, I think gave me the idea for doing an entire episode based on interpreting this and maybe even parts of the previous episodes as kind of a very mommy issues kind of episode specifically. Right. I mean, everyone kind of, and where that relates to Borman is this idea of a even kind of comes up when Jade is hugging him. This fear of intimacy, a distrust of people. This is even potentially kind of reaching levels of kind of like Oedipal kind of levels and parallels, where Borman hears this soft, seductive voice, and he's not sure if it's a lover or a mother.
Right, yeah.
Which really, I didn't think about it, and when my partner kind of like started putting it in similar ways. I was just like, wow, okay, yeah, that gives me some things to think about through the rest of this episode, and also as it relates to Borman,
Right.
because yeah, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, yeah, Borman got some mommy issues for sure.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. And those voices, like every time you see him near the door, like they keep going, they keep saying something else, and like that the next scene after they do a little bit more purgation, they cut to Borman like at the door. I think that's the moment where he's like trying to pick the lock, or maybe it's earlier, where he's like, "Oh," and you think he's gonna say a bad word, but he says fiddlesticks, which is funny. But then you hear the voices, and if you turn on the subtitles, it says, "You can make this right. She took the Lux." Because at one point I was like, well, when I first watched it, I don't think I watched it with subtitles. I was like, man, where did this come from? This came out of nowhere. Why is he so paranoid? I mean, maybe that thing has him under its spell, but the door, that is, but that makes sense now. Like he's like paranoid, and when he hears that, he looks down, and the whole pouch that was on his belt that had the Lux in it is not there anymore. And I was like, oh shit, where'd that shit go? But then as we see at the end of the episode, it was all part of one of those illusions that the castle is casting, because like at the end he looks down and it's right there, and he just sort of chuckles and walks on. But like this castle is seriously fucking with everybody's with their visions and everything like that. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and even kind of reiterating, like, the fear of intimacy is even brought up when he confronts Jade and Kit. You were the last two I was intimately close to. Kind of referring to the scene, which I kind of breezed over, but the very touching scene, as portrayed by Kellerman and Amar Chadha Patel.
Yeah, yeah.
Is really fantastically played. I just, narratively kind of confusing, and its dialogue could have used some work. But, I think ultimately, despite all of that, I think they do a really fantastic job with it. But as I was saying, with this fear of intimacy that often comes from a lack of a strong kind of maternal part of your life, I think kind of coming up, blaming them because, not only because of the voice is telling him that because it knows that he has this fear of being intimate, of being close to people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting, and definitely gives us more to think about for that character. I did think I wanted to hit on, we were talking about Borman, his mommy issues, but Allura has direct, obvious mommy issues, like coming up in this episode, like with her never knowing her mother and being able to finally see her for the first time in her life. Like, that episode hit like a fucking truck, dude.
Yeah, and I don't know, like it has a feeling. It has that feeling of like, is it real? Is it not real? Is this just what the castle is telling her? Or is this a moment where like she's actually in two places or two different times at once? Like, is that because this castle is wacky? It's got some spooky shit, creepy shit going on. And why wouldn't there be a spot in the castle where she could be and for lack of a better word, we'll use a Star Wars term, flow walk back into time and interact with people from a different time zone, or not time zone, but from a different time. But why couldn't she? I mean, probably not, but I like to think maybe her mother did see her in her final moments and realize that.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting takeaway, is this whole idea of flow walking. We talked about it previously in episodes. And I think it's a really interesting way to tie in kind of this this property into Star Wars in a way.
Absolutely.
I mean, the magic system and the Force have often and are almost obviously equated to each other. the way that they're both talked about. Oh, pardon me. I think it's really interesting to know what the. In fact, I have a note kind of in my notes that's like, we need to do an entire episode on what the fuck Nockmaar is, what it is doing, how it is acting, because it is often working in its own to its own detriment.
Yeah.
In the way that it's showing these moments, especially where it comes to Alora, which is fucking cool as hell, and kind of shows you that her power, the what did the Hubert call it, this raw celestial power, kind of coming through and being a factor in how she interacts with the world around her, which is fucking really interesting, and kind of perfectly the amount of subtlety that I want to see in a Willow property. It's what we got in the original. Exactly this kind of like draw your own conclusions, but it's all there. Like you can really kind of make your own way through it. But yeah, I would do it. I could do an entire episode on this. Like I am fucking fascinated by how what Nockmaar is doing with these visions, how it is interacting with our heroes, because I think it might. It is pulling into a. It is pulling Alora specifically in the dungeon of Nockmaar back into the moment where her mother was killed. I mean, God, talk about brutal. I mean, she's sitting there watching while the soldier, the Nockmaar soldier, is striking her mother down.
Yeah, I do like the fact that when they did that, they showed the slice with the sword, but like when you see her, she's not headless. I kind of like that.
I can appreciate it going more graphic, but I also can appreciate it being a little more I can appreciate it trying to in this way trying to cater to an audience that doesn't necessarily need to see a beheading in it.
Not only that,
media.
Sometimes like the best storytelling isn't like showing you visually everything in its gory details. It's leaving something to the imagination. And I appreciate that way more than just graphic, blood and guts, I mean, I do like graphic blood and guts. That's fun too, for certain things, but yeah.
In this case specifically, it's a lot more sensitive, understanding of us, the audience's level of like immersion, and like we're not taken out by the moment where it doesn't reduce the impact of Laura watching her mother get struck down, Yeah. It's still that intense, but in almost like a Hitchcockian kind of way, it definitely feels like we're getting more power out of that moment by not being explicit with the depiction of violence.
I think that like had they for each individual property as a separate case, I think in this property, if they did take the more graphic view of things, I think it would be like the writers talking down to the audience. Whereas the way that they do it, this actually, they assume that, you're an intelligent human being. You and this will give you what you need and stimulate you for to want more.
Yeah. I think it's a beautiful bit, and I don't know if you know this, but the actual actor who plays Alora's mother in the film comes back and does the ADR for her own voice.
Oh, really? Oh, that's so cool. I was wondering about that. Yeah, that's really cool. I like that a lot.
Me too. I'm really glad that they're able to pull a lot of the older cast members or the cast members from the old film into this new property. And honestly, I thought it felt a little bit disjointed, these new lines of dialogue. I didn't necessarily like. There was something about it that like perked my interest. And then I think either Kasdan or Warwick or someone on someone posted on Twitter that it was the same actor, and I saw that and was like, oh, yeah, can you imagine walking back into a role after fucking 35
Right?
years? That's
That would
a
be
world
crazy.
that you're trying to bridge the gap between these two
Yeah.
worlds, this life that you've lived past this character that was literally just like in the first 5 minutes less than the movie,
Yeah.
and giving us something really to chew on, to think about. And this whole, like, she's young and she's beautiful and powerful kind of
Yeah.
stuff we're getting from this, from Elora's mother. It's so it really makes you wonder if Elora is actually in the past looking at her mother, or if it's something that, because of her raw celestial power, Elora is able to kind of manifest a positive, something that she needs internally, something
Right,
that
yeah.
Elora desperately needs to see. Her mother having some kind of closure on that relationship before that she never would have gotten otherwise. Would my mom be proud of me, is something that we all ask ourselves. And
Right, yeah.
especially if you've lost a parent, those moments hit even harder. Thinking about my pops and how, like, I think about this question all of the time. Like,
Mm,
I had a great relationship with him, and it still is. It's never going to not be something I struggle with. So seeing that in
right.
a film kind of depicted unambiguously, like, so so loving, a kind of connection that Alora gets to have, I thought that was one of the highlights of this episode.
Oh yeah,
Easily.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And before Elora sees this vision, Kit and Elora kind of have a little bit of a moment, and Kit's coming around. She tries to tell Elora, but then Elora wanders off because she hears. Did you hear that? What? Graydon screaming because he's being reamed. And then yeah. So she just misses out on that chance. I don't think. I mean, yeah, she could have been a little bit more like, "Hey, I'm trying to tell you something," but I can kind of understand that point where Elora just wanders off, and then she tries to go with her, and then as she turns the corner, she's nowhere in sight. And again, like, I think this is like, it's kind of like Hogwarts, where the staircases change, but like just quicker and like more illusory, you know?
Right. Yeah. I think
you see what it wants you to see.
Right. Yeah. And it's fascinating how it affects different people. Like with Borman, it tells him that they stole the Lux, and he goes and chases after them, and only at the end revealing essentially that to Kit and Jade that he's had the Lux. He has the Lux Arcana,
Yep.
which is fucking something we were talking about in our last episode. How is that going to play out? Is Borman ever going to let on that he has it? And because of the machinations of Nockmaar, he reveals this very important fact to them.
Yep.
So,
yeah. And
I thought that was cool.
He lies, but it's purely for self-interest, but I don't know, like, you can't help but love him. And I feel like that's not just the sheer power of that actor's charisma, but he's definitely got a 20 charisma. But but it's also the character, like that character is that character with the 20 charisma that just wins people over. Oh yeah, I lied, but it's not a big deal. And they're like, oh yeah, it's not a big deal. You don't need to see their identification. It's almost like a force power.
Right. We could talk for hours about Borman and his stats, because he's got a 20 in practically everything but wisdom, like that's the stat he completely dropped,
Yep,
everything else is ridiculous. Like, he's good at fighting, he's got a good constitution, he's got the intelligence, he's got charisma. He's got dexterity, as evidenced by his. He's got the lockpicking kit on him. You know, you have to have that as at least a feature.
He just happened to roll like a 3 or something like that every time.
Well, yeah, I think that would have been I mean, you would have to be a pretty high level rogue to actually be able to pick that lock. I think you would even have to be like one of the arcane trickster, I think it is, archetypes where you're a rogue that could do magic.
Yeah, Samantha talking about how it's probably enchanted.
Right. I almost, of course. Disappointing that we never get to see behind that vault door, but I think by the end of the show we just might.
Yeah.
But speaking of the end of the show, I did want to get to, because we've been carefully kind of like hinting at getting to this point where we're at the top of the tower. Allura being deceived by Graydon. Again, just I'm really stoked on how they pulled off a lot of those. Not all of it, but a lot of this deception. And with that scene specifically, like, I don't care who you are when you're watching that. When you're watching Graydon tie his belt up and like get his shirt back on and tell the story about Willow taking on getting the curse from the Lich, it transferring to him. That's I don't know. I don't care who you are. You're going to have a conflict in your heart, like whether or not this is real or not. It's such a well played moment for Tony Revolori, and just the character of Graydon having that, like we were talking in the last episode, you know, these moments where we were wondering how the demon was going to manifest inside of Graydon, you know, and that was a big point of interest. And like these deceptions were something that we were kind of anticipating. Still, we as an audience were being kind of like led along by it, which just speaks to the performance of Tony Revolori, as well as like how well that scenario and that story beat was kind of played out. I thought they did a really bang up job with that.
Oh yeah, I like how he's like, hey, can you help me with my shirt?
Right.
Like,
yeah, it's
to get
that sexual tension.
You know? Yeah.
Right. Even going further into that sexual tension, kind of being played out almost with Graydon's like Lich infused personality coming out and being like, well, isn't this what you want? This is Eric's strong, he's confident, etc. You know, I think it's really interesting, and Allura being like, you know, that's not why I love him. It's such a really wonderful moment, and also reminds us that she does genuinely love Eric. So I think, I mean, knowing kind of where we're going, it almost seems like if Graydon and Allura's sexual tension kind of keeps getting ramped up, it makes me believe that they're probably not going to keep Eric around. Eric might end up becoming the victim of our of the blood of the Six, you know?
Yeah, he's just the bait.
Well, you know, Bad Morta's power runs in all three of her and her descendants. So yeah, I mean, it's just as possible.
Yeah, he's simultaneously bait and Plan B.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even say he's not Plan A. That seems like what they came to Tirzleen for in the first place, was Eric. And maybe that's because they view him as maybe easier prey than Sorsha or Kit.
Right.
But it could just be an unknown that we haven't been revealed yet, why Eric would be the best selection of them all.
Or possibly maybe he was just the one that was easiest to separate in that battle, you know?
Right. They might have been looking for any of the three. But until this episode, the Gales weren't necessarily actively trying to get Allura. They were kind of like, well, it's fine if we let these cursed demons do the ritual, finish the ritual, we'll be fine after that. But the Gales say we have to get the girl, and I mean, obviously, I'm pretty sure they're talking about Alora here.
Yeah, probably.
And there are moments in the trailers that we've seen where Alora just suddenly isn't there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Maybe she does get captured in the next episode and actually does get to see her bow.
Right. Just as a silly note, there's like, I like how the Lich tricks her into taking him to the tower, but to make it seem like to her that it's her idea. But in her line, she's like, I know how to get there. I was born here. She was there once when she was born, and again one more time when she was almost sacrificed. How does she fucking know the way to the goddamn tower? Granted, like, and I thought about this a lot, and granted, that baby did have a lot of charisma, and just in just from Sherlindria's point of view, the baby was somewhat self-aware, but somewhere between infanthood and adulthood. I don't think. I mean, there was a disconnect there, but like, honestly, I can't believe that she really knows the fucking way. But
yeah, I thought that was a weird line. I guess maybe Alora is saying that this connection with Nockmaar that's kind of like revealing itself in almost a magical kind of way might be what Alora is referring to as far as like, I can get you there,
Okay, I can see that.
But the way that the line itself is maybe less impactful than a different choice for that line.
Right, yeah.
Could have put it a different way, I think, and maybe had that land a little differently.
Yeah.
Just my opinion. My silly little opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. So I was talking about kind of some of these moments in the story. This is another one, and I think when they're actually in the tower, this whole Graydon's monologue about the Lich's monologue, the Crone's monologue, whoever Graydon is who is speaking through Graydon, referring to Babmorda, revealing that Willow wasn't some powerful, didn't release some powerful spell that killed Babmorda. It was her carelessness, right? Like, just stop telling me. Show me, motherfucker. This is one of those things we were talking about a moment ago. We've talked about a handful of times through this episode. They have a tendency to just tell us things rather than showing us things. And in a lot of cases, like you relying on the literal footage from the previous film to tell us the story as well, which I have feelings about, especially where it comes to actors like Gene Marsh and Patty Hayes and Billy Barty. I hope these people's families are getting fucking money from this shit.
But I think a lot of their estates have to receive some compensation.
I mean, we saw that with Peter Cushing in one of the recent Star Wars. Was it Rogue One?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. They kind of like reviving a dead actor's performance. Yes. I mean, Rogue One does it with Cushing. If it is Rogue One, I can't remember, but that moment with Cushing is like fully, he's completely delivering new dialogue and stuff like that. It's really wild. Carrie Fisher, another great example.
Carrie Fisher, yeah.
Right. But yeah, this is literally just their performances from the past, so being that it is the intellectual property of Lucasfilm, of Disney, the legality might be a little different than recreating these people's images and performances. I'm not sure, but I hope that is the case because, I mean, without Mrs. Marsh and Mrs. Hayes and Billy Barty, we wouldn't have like as strong of an original film to be pulling from. Their performances are incredible, and I think yeah, yeah, I I think a lot of that was a little bit on the nose. I think with Laura seeing her child self and having that moment where she's like, she needs her mother, that's great. That works really well because you're giving us an emotional tie to this thing. But when it's just, a swirling vortex of moments that happened already in a previous film, it feels like you're telling us that, well, you probably didn't watch the original film, so we'll give it to you here so that you have context for this scene. And I don't think that's very strong narratively. And a little bit frustrating. I hope, I'm glad that they're included because they are Titans, but, I hope that they are getting their just due for this because they are integral and that's my whole point on that. I just
yeah, and before he even reveals how, and I keep writing because I got tired of writing Bavmorda so many times, I just started writing Bavy. Yeah. He reveals how Willow's defeated, but before that happens, Willow bursts in. Where the fuck has he been? Where did he go? Because he wasn't in that room where he was doing the purgation. Like, what did the Lich do with him? Where did he go? And Willow bursts in, and then Graydon uses Force Choke. And then he does his little monologue. And then we get the moment that I loved from the trailer where he asks Willow how he's going to defeat him, and he says the same way as last time with my friends, and then through the smoke images of Finrazel and Sorsha comes, the next generation in the door, which is pretty cool.
It's an awesome moment. It is really cool. I have my nitpicks about it, but I think ultimately that was really awesome. I think that the idea that I always imagined that Willow's sleight of hand magic was just, it's just not necessarily super powerful magic. It is still magic because, like, even with a lot of the sleight of hand tricks Willow does achieve, actually pulling them off, not exactly easy sleight of hand magic.
Right, yeah.
And I think I've always imagined his Noan kind of ancestry has a certain level of inherent magic, just as Allura does.
Yeah.
And so this ability with sleight of hand is augmented by the magical system of the world. Of course, this isn't spelled out. We get a little bit of in Waylon Drew's novel, but yes, we don't have like it's not apparent.
Right. Well, but it goes along with a theme of illusion because the castle. I think of the castle's illusion more as like a CGI illusion, whereas Willow's illusion is practical effect. It's actual. You know what I mean? Like card tricks, disappearing pig, stuff like that. Which is cool. And I like it. It kind of reminds me of another franchise, The Magicians, where when one of the main characters is being, for lack of a better word, sorted into like whether he's going to actually go to this school of magic or not. He like his main thing. He loves this other world that the magic's supposed to be in. Didn't know that it really existed. So he did what he could in this world, which was he learned all the sleight of hand, all the card tricks, like everything that he could. And he became so good at it that his actual inherent magical ability was starting to integrate within his physical illusion tricks. And he didn't even realize it. And that's what they discovered when he was sorted. So I think that's kind of one of those things with Willow that happens with him too, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think so it is so I am seeing it kind of played like a a shot at Willow's ego in the story so far. Like maybe it doesn't necessarily have that inherent kind of magic to it. Sorsha refers to it, very derogatory in a very derogatory kind of way as, your disappearing pig trick. And we hear it again in this episode where it's like, it wasn't Willow that did it. It was Badmore's carelessness.
Right.
Which is, I think in both cases, kind of a illustration at the of how both the Crone and Sorsha are thinking of not just Willow but the Nelwyn and their abilities. Right. A way of looking at them as lesser than.
Mm-hmm.
But narratively, it does give us this moment where Alora gets to step into her power, which is it has been necessary for this whole movie. And I think that's a good idea. I'm glad that we're there with this movie, this show. But yeah, I'm glad that we are there. And Willow's whole he's given this chance to remind everyone that you can't do this alone, that no one person has the power to overthrow an oppressive power structure, something I've harped on a lot about the strength of the original Willow. This idea that collectivism, that unity amongst classes and races, and the alignment of different marginalized communities coming together to overthrow an oppressive power structure is how it must be done.
Yeah.
However, in this,
united we stand.
Exactly. The only real difference, and it is a kind of major one, is that in this show, power is not enforced by Empire, by the Crone. The Crone, the Blood of the Sixth, they don't have an institutional power within Anduin, and what kind of power they do possess outside of Anduin into the greater kind of celestial world of Willow and Anduin, the magical world that is inhabited by Fae and things of that nature. We don't necessarily see how that structure is affected or affecting Anduin in this case. That internal battle going on within Anduin's celestial realm playing out on this mortal turf. And it looks like that's where we're probably going to be going. The immemorial city definitely feels less like a real city and more like an idea. It can potentially somewhere, these ruins of it may potentially be the ruins of the celestial realm, or some portion of it, some ancient kingdom of it. So, yeah, I think with the Crone, at least in its position, or Badmore, the cult, the Order of the Worm, in this work of fiction, is a radical group, a fanatical fraction of violent extremists, let's say. And I think that we're it's giving me hope that there is still some of that old George Lucas lefty shit that we might still be getting in the show, which I felt may have been absent in the previous episodes. That I was afraid that we were going to wind up in this much more place where the show doesn't want to necessarily take sides as much as the original is unafraid to do so. But yes, this is that whole story beat. I'm going to do this with my friends. Definitely gives me some hope. And really hitting those narrative ideas.
Definitely. I have a sort of Cotton Eye Joe question. Where did he come from? Where did he go? There's this little fucking mummy puppet that jumps out from under whatever and grabs Willow and holds him. Where did he come from? Where did he go? There's no precedent for art. Did they cut a scene that establishes what that is? And then afterwards, we don't see hide nor hair of it. Like what? Where? I mean, honestly, I thought it was funny. It definitely broke the tension a little bit and gave you a little bit of levity, but I'm like, where where the fuck and it was cute. It was kind of a cute little mummy thing. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I figured I didn't I I didn't think about it too much, predominantly because it felt like in line with what happened in the high tower in the original film.
Yeah,
Willow
Brazier.
Willow being chased around by the Brazier, exactly. It felt like a statue that existed within the room that was brought to life by Graydon or the crone or the demon, whatever's power that is kind of strengthened in this room.
Yeah. I just thought it was funny.
It is kind of strange. And yeah, we've talked a little bit about like the beat where Elora is looking at herself and she needs her mother. I think with that whole Elora and Kit kind of rivalry, I think we're finally getting to the end of that now that Kit has approached her and kind of like told her essentially to do in a very similar way that the High Aldwin told Willow. It's that you have to try or you're going to regret it. Whether or not it works, you have to try. Act now or regret it.
Yeah.
I think that's a really poignant moment, not just in this story, but through this whole world's narrative, is that, as difficult as it may seem and as impossible as it may feel, you have to try, because otherwise all is lost.
Yeah, and if you do nothing, that's a choice, but if you do nothing, there's no way. It's just the same thing as like, I want to win the lotto someday. Well, if you don't buy a ticket, there's no chance of you winning.
That's your comparison. Yeah, absolutely.
It's that sort of thing. And I like how like finally Kit tells her, yeah, the bush is real. The bush happened. And still she kind of, Elora doubts herself after the vision with her mom and after Kit says that. But then Kit says, you just have to throw out the recipe.
And to your point, as you brought up a couple of times, Willow just seems kind of like a prick sometimes in this episode. And that moment where where Elora goes over to try and break the curse from Graydon, he literally says, "Damn it, Elora, don't you dare!" And I'm just like, why are you responding like that?
Yeah, I feel like at some
fear
point,
for Elora's safety, is that
right? It might be like I think. And like going back to like when I had mentioned that before, you had said, well, like Willow's clearly got some shit going on, and it's definitely like he's getting older. He's a little bit grumpier because that's what happens when you get older. Sometimes don't want to deal with these darn kids, and like some clearly Mims is there, but Rhiannon and Kaya are not. Like, if they were there, they would have been in that Nelwyn village, And so, like, he's got some dark shit going on that he clearly hasn't dealt with. So I think you're right in that like, that's probably a huge part in the fact that now he's got Elora Danan again, and she's missed this opportunity to hone her magic. She's, and he feels, like a father figure to her, and he wants to protect her. Like, I think you're right. I think he's being overcautious from a good place, and it's coming off as like just anger. And I've been there when that happens, So like it's you mean well and you want to do good for these people, but it just comes out as anger,
Yeah. I mean, one of the real big unanswered questions from this episode is now that when Elora actually does go over to Graydon and throws out the recipe, essentially. Not only are we hitting that sexual tension note once again, we're also left with this big burning question: why? Is it Elora's raw celestial power that allows the demon that is possessing Graydon to kind of flow through and out her? Is it this Fey ancestry? And that's, or is it something else?
Yeah.
I'm very curious. Especially like it would make sense that it's something that Willow wouldn't have 100% assurance of this is going to work or not.
Yeah.
Obviously this isn't something that Willow thought Elora would be capable of, or potentially even knew about being a possibility, or they might have never done the ritual in the first place.
And I think like what you said earlier, just a moment ago, is pertinent here because like, through Willow's like all of his shit that he's dealing with in his head, like he forgets the fact that in this world there are moments where you have to act or you're going to regret it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, I think I think the next couple moments of the film or the episode after we realize that Graydon's been saved, and Elora it doesn't appear cursed in any way.
Yeah.
I think that we've covered most of that stuff. They talk about the blood of the six. We see Kale's helmet and skull. But yeah, I think that this question and Willow's temperament are going to be kind of like played out through the next episode. Especially their bonds all being kind of probably tested to the limit very, very soon here.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
What's Willow going to do when he finds out that Borman's had the Lux Arcana now for days?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's an interesting. Yeah, I mean, because
are they gonna find the I forget the Chimerian cure. Are they gonna find the Curus?
Well, and it begs the question: is the Curus even necessary?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Lux Arcana is the magical key that makes the Curus work. Theoretically,
you could apply that. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. You could use. I mean, it makes me think of It makes me think of Willow's staff, for instance.
Yeah.
That same kind of almost cylindrical, magical force with the same color kind of existing there within that staff.
Yeah.
Are they related? Is it a similar kind of magical key?
Right.
What's the deal there?
I mean, yeah, I just had a funny thought just because of the shape of the Curus, the Lux. What if, because I wrote down when I saw like the way that they visualized Elora taking the evil out of Graydon. I put Elora as a Brita filtration system for evil.
Grimhilda filter.
And the Lux looks like the shape of a filter. So it's like maybe a magical enhancement to this filter. What if Elora just holds the Lux and it translates its power, amplifies her power somehow?
That's fucking cool. Yeah, that would be really interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. So,
yeah.
I guess as far as my predictions for the next episode, I think, there's potential for Elora to get nabbed by the Gales. Mm-hmm. I think that hopefully Borman kind of reveals some of the truth behind him and Madmartigan's backstory, where they've been, how his journey is kind of like ended. The Curus, maybe more information about that. Potentially, Foreman could know a lot more about these characters than he's led on so far, from maybe having some knowledge of Willow through Madmartigan, or even having some knowledge of like what happened to Jade's family, what happened to Graydon's family, whether there's some kind of familial connection between Graydon and Madmartigan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope that also Willow starts building some of those. Like he does seem like he's getting there as well, but even slower than Kit.
Yeah, and I think at some point, I mean, clearly from that one scene where he's just kicking it and laughing, at some point the tension will break. He'll come around and they'll really truly form a bond. And I think that's possibly where we'll end the series. Like finally all of their like shit together is going to be broken down. They're going to be okay and bond with each other, and then they're going to be ready for the real adventure, which is going to happen hopefully in season 2 if it gets picked up again.
Yeah, there's a lot more questions being thrown around on whether or not season 2 will actually happen than I thought. I thought they had already kind of like confirmed season 2 was coming, but
right, yeah,
it seems less confirmed as of this moment.
Yeah, man. I hope it is. I hope it gets confirmed.
Yeah.
So were the Gales at Nockmaar the whole time, or were they just on their way and they just got there?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. It doesn't look like the whole party of Gales is there, though. It looks like it's just Birdcage Man and Bird Lady.
Yeah.
What'd you call her?
Bird Lady. Creepy Bird Lady.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like I keep telling Samantha, it reminds me of like a character that Kate McKinnon might play.
Amazing.
Like just the expression on her face.
But I think that's. I mean, I have a jillion other thoughts we could keep going down this rabbit hole with.
Yeah.
And if you do, audience, please let us know in the comments on this YouTube video or wherever you might be watching it. We're very interested in kind of going back and forth with you guys, hearing your fan theories, hearing what you think's going to happen in the next episode. We've got a couple of days until that happens, so and I join the Discord because I'm going to be kind of watching these episodes every Wednesday or every Tuesday at midnight. So, keep join the Discord, and I'm down to watch it with you. We'll kind of like have our own little conversation about that. So, but thank you so much for hanging out with us, my friends.
Awesome.
Oh, I hope you have a lovely afternoon, evening, day, wherever and whenever you're watching this. And take care of each other. Take care of yourself.
See you next time.